previously we started making our map, and we started just working with these little small roads. Let me zoom in a little bit so you can see a little better. Maybe there. So we started working just with these small roads. Now between now and then I've gone ahead and drawn out all the little small roads that I want to include. I didn't do the whole map because I don't need the whole map. My focus is just here-ish, so I just want to put the lines in this area. Like, let's say that maybe my focus is maybe like here-ish, just off Laboratory Road. So there's no reason to do the ones way out here, at least not in my opinion, because that wasn't really my focus. And I'm not targeting the whole city, I'm just kind of targeting the people that live, work, go to school here. So I've done all the small roads. Now the next thing is the next level of roads that we want. For me, I actually wanted to include these little bitty roads. And they're actually not even really roads, they're really kind of more of like footpaths. You can't drive a car on these, maybe a golf cart. That's just the size of these. So first thing, I've gone ahead and I've locked this layer so that way I can't accidentally move these or manipulate these or mess with these, because that could cause some problems between drawing these roads and the new footpaths. So I've locked that layer, and I'm just going to create a new layer. Get out my pen tool again. I'm going to switch my color. I think green is a good color for a footpath, so I'm going to go green and just start drawing these out just like I did before. Now sometimes the accuracy isn't that great, as you can see here, and that's because the pen tool likes to snap to things. So we could try to adjust the settings, get it to stop doing that, but the snapping can be very useful actually sometimes. So normally what I do is I don't normally mess with the snaps too much. Instead, once I've drawn the lines, I normally go in with my direct selection tool, the wide arrow, and click on the anchors and just move them where I want. I can drag them with my mouse, but that can cause occasional snapping, but I can also use my arrow keys. Now, the farther zoomed out you are, the harder it is to decide exactly where it is, because the area is smaller. As you zoom in more and more, it becomes easier to get these points exactly where you want them. And now the level of accuracy also depends on you. You know, depending on what you're doing, level of accuracy might be very important, but not necessarily. You know, if you're just drawing a map on how someone gets to their favorite restaurant or whatever, then maybe it's not as important that it's 100% accurate. Sure, you want it to look generally accurate, but if the point is here versus there, sure, that's inaccurate by a few feet, but does it matter in that situation? Probably not. So I'll draw out these paths, and it can be a little tricky sometimes. Like, we've got this sort of like three-pointed path, and if I click here, it's going to delete it. So sometimes I need to start on a different part and then go back to the vertex from a different angle, so that way it doesn't accidentally delete my original anchor. And I can just kind of move this around and get it to look the way that it needs to look. Something sort of like this. And of course, once again, I can zoom way in if I really want to, if those little bitty gaps or changes bother me. They bother me a little bit. So that's what I'll do. So just like on the previous one, I'll just go in and I'll draw all of those footpaths. Now, thanks to not doing this live, I can go from having just 3 to having all of these that I've prepared earlier. Now there's a couple on here that I did not actually take care of yet. Specifically this circle here, these little bits here, and there's some stuff over here that I decided not to do, and I just got tired of doing it for now. I could always do it later. But I figured that there was enough here to show the next step. So this can be kind of tricky here, because as we're trying to draw these lines, once again, let's unlock this layer. Make sure we have this layer on. It can be a little tricky to get them to connect. Now sometimes it works great, but sometimes it doesn't. So let's try this one. Of course it's working great now. Sometimes it acts a little weird. So like, let's go ahead and delete this line and try to draw it from scratch again. So if I put this up here and that way and over here, this way, that way, kind of a nicely weird shaped road or path, probably going around trees and whatnot. So I quickly did V to switch to my selection tool and back to the pen tool, and now if I try to click on these, There we go. So it added a point here and added a point there, but didn't connect them. And that can be a little tricky sometimes. So the reason why was we had this path selected, and so it added the points to that path. So we could click off to deselect. There's also a hotkey for that up here, but it's just as fast just to click off most of the time with your arrow tool. Now if we use the pin and we connect to the two paths, we should get a line. Now the other option too is if you don't want to deselect, you could also just intentionally miss the path, and then you can then go in with your direct selection tool and drop these where you want them to go. It's kind of your choice. It's up to you. Whatever you are more comfortable with, whatever you feel is more efficient for your workflow. Alright, so the next weird spot to mention is this circle. So how do we deal with that circle? How do we get the pin tool to go from here to there, wrap all the way around, add these little bits there, etc.? Actually, it's not that hard. It might seem hard, but that's because you're thinking about it wrong. So we're not actually going to draw the whole thing with the circle. We're going to work a little bit smarter. We draw these paths with the circle, if I can get them straight. But we don't need to draw the circle itself with the pin. Instead, the circle is just a circle, of course. So here-ish, oh, that's a little big. Right about there, we'll drag this over, get in the right spot. Zoom in a little bit, be able to more fine-tune exactly its position. That looks pretty good. And then we can go in and modify these paths to actually go to the circle. Yeah, that looks alright. Not perfect, but once again, it also depends on what the purpose is and how far in they're going to be able to look at the map and what sides it's going to be printed at and all that stuff. So if you're just viewing the map way out here, spending a bunch of time trying to get everything absolutely perfect doesn't really matter because no one's going to see it that close. Now that we have the footpaths and we have the small streets, we have Main Street here, which I've also already drawn just as sort of this teal color. Maybe I should change that to a different color. I'll do that in a few minutes. So if we hide the backgrounds, we have that, and that looks alright. But how do we make it look better? And how do we make it look more like a map? These are just lines. Maps look a little bit nicer than that normally. The next step in dealing with the streets and making them look more the way that we're used to actually has to do with the appearance window over here. So what we need to do, we need to unlock this, and we could go in here and try to select every little street. We could make sure that everything else is locked, which they are. Zoom out and highlight everything. We could do stuff like that if you wanted to, but really the more efficient way is just to click this little button over here. That's going to select everything on this layer, and then we can go to the appearance window and we can modify the appearance of everything all at once. For making a map, the particular thing that we want is this option down here to add a new stroke. And with that, we can start to increase the size of the roads, and it'll adjust all of them equally. And we can change the color. So maybe this is what we're using, blue. I think blue. So maybe that value of blue. And we can even add another new stroke in there and make it a little bit smaller, and this stroke could be white. So now we have some nice streets here. I think I want this to be a little bit thinner, actually. Oh, I clicked off, I deselected, so I have to reselect. There we go. Go back to appearance. Make that a little bit smaller. There we go. That looks pretty good. That's a little weird there. I should probably adjust that, but I can adjust that in a few minutes. You can see a few little issues here where things aren't connecting, but I can fix all those, go back into my direct selection tool, modify those paths, etc. Now we also have our little footpaths here, so let's modify this too. So I will lock that one, unlock this one, select everything in it, go into Appearance, once again add a new stroke, make it a little bit thicker but not too thick, and let's make it green. Now right now the footpaths are showing above the street, and I don't really like that, but that's easy to fix. The only reason it's showing above is because it is above in the layer panel. So if I just drag this below, there we go. Now the footpath is below the streets. And lastly, we have this layer here, our highway, or not a highway, a major road. Unlock that, make it the selection. Oops, that was the example earlier. This one, this is the one we want. So there we go. Select it, appearance window, once again new stroke, make it the thickness that we want, change the color, kind of more like that, and we can add another new stroke to put in the inside color, which would do white, make it smaller, something like that. So now if we hide the backgrounds, you can see it's starting to look much more like a map. Now we still need the buildings, and we need the grass, and we need some other stuff in there too. Having some street names might be nice, but we're getting there. We now know how to get the streets to look more or less the way that we want. Well, that's bothering me. Let's fix that. So unlock little streets, click on the little streets. So we've got these two paths here that are not connected. There we go. Just deleted one anchor point and reattached it from this one to that one, and it's better. Pretty good. Not too bad. Not too hard.